Many years ago, I was very interested in this subject and had many late night talks with a friend of mine about the Heisenberg principle. And if you want to get the math, then you've got to go and read it all in Wikipedia and you'll understand it. But to my understanding, it basically meant like this, that you couldn't really be objective about anything because you being there will affect the situation. Now, scientifically, if you're doing an experiment, the fact that you're doing the experiment will influence the outcome of the experiment. It's almost like that you're standing in a bucket and you're trying to lift yourself up. You can't do it. And that way you can't do an experiment without you altering the results of the experiment. To do the experiment purely objectively, you have to be away from the experiment. But because you're doing the experiment, you're influencing the results. And I think that's why they use this Heisenberg motive in the Breaking Bad series, so that they could show how one person can affect a whole world. Perhaps sometimes I think it's a very, very responsible thing to give somebody advice, because you might invoke the Heisenberg principle, and you might just give somebody advice and they might take it, and you might find out that their whole life changes, and a lot of life changes happen just from your stupid advice. So you've got to be careful to give people advice. Know what you're doing, because you never know what chemical reaction you might set free. And I think the Heisenberg principle also works with the internet. Let's talk about YouTube. And okay, it's a virtual world, but we're real people. And often you might find that something that happened on YouTube will interact and influence the real world. And we can see that now because YouTube has become mainstream, whereas before it was just a place for nerds and self-clickers who like to put up their pictures of themselves. But now we see that YouTube itself is changing the world, because atrocities, policemen getting filmed, beating people up, 1,000 ways you see the Heisenberg principle in action. So it's quite deep, if you know what I mean.